Hi, welcome. This is the Addiction Show. My name is Shira Goldberg. I have with me today Mark Lipp. He wrote a book. It's a quite amazing story of his struggle with his daughter. It's called An Addict Within. He is also, like myself, a life coach. He had training with Strategic Interventions, and that's through Tony Robbins and Chloe Madanis. And I have to tell you, Chloe Madanis is actually one of my textbooks, so pretty impressive. Your whole book is really a take on what it's like as a father and how your daughter's addiction really took over the whole family dynamic and all of the chaos that caused. So I have to ask you, what gave you the strength to write an entire book about it?
Well, first of all, Shira, I'd like to thank you for having me on this morning, and I am honored to be here, and I want to commend you on the great work you're doing in the community. So that's before I start. What happened was I've been going through this with my family for about 10 years, and I noticed that many books were written by addicts, but very few about the family dynamics caused by addiction. I was speaking at a convention for Nar-Anon in Northern California, and somebody said to me, "You ought to write a book." And I said, "Write a book? I can barely write emails." I'm a business major. I've never written a book. But I was thinking on my long drive back down to Southern California, I was thinking, what does it take to write a book? So I did what every American does. We get on the internet and we research what it takes to write a book. And it said somewhere between 50 and 85,000 words is a book. And I said, well, I looked at all the notes I had over the years, keeping my diary of my daughter, and I had probably in excess of 30,000 words. I said, well, I'm pretty close, a lot closer than I thought. So one day I decided to partition a couple of hours a day to write the book. And I wrote it over a period of about 9 months, and the whole purpose of the book was to show how anyone in your family who has the disease of addiction ends up taking over your life, that of your families, because you are so busy trying to help / enable your loved one in addiction. And it became kind of a cathartic experience for me. And it took me roughly about another 9 months to figure out whether I wanted to publish it, because as many of us know who are parents of addicts, I'm also the brother of a 30-year addict who currently is clean, is that we have a lot of guilt. And we don't really want to tell the world that we have an addicted family member. So it took me a little more courage, and then I finally released it just a couple of months ago.
I noticed that. Congratulations. I think that's just an enormous endeavor to take on. But I can really understand how cathartic it would be for you. How did your daughter react to knowing that you were going to pretty much tell her whole tragedy and journey in a book?
At first, well, over those many years, she's pretty much been addicted and on some form of drug, one or another. So she kind of knew I was doing it, but it really didn't affect her that much because she was numb. She currently is an addict to heroin, a needle injection. Currently, though, she is clean for about 11 months. This is the longest period I can remember since she was 14 years old. She was not happy, and then we sat down and I explained to her, the purpose of the book was not to tell your story, but it was to tell my story of how it affected me, the other family members. Yes, it shows your action, but more importantly, in this case, my reaction, both good and bad. And some of what you will learn in the book is the mistakes that I made, some of which were horrendous, and some of the decisions that I made were quite good. So you're going to see both sides of that and how it affected everybody, including me.
I think that's a really important point of being a father to, or a parent of someone who's really in the throes of addiction, because you're at such a loss, you don't know what to do. So it's almost like you just keep trying anything possible that you can think of, and sometimes those are mistakes, and looking back or being judged in hindsight, you can see maybe I shouldn't have done that. And I think that really resonates with a lot of family members. You don't know if this is enabling. You really don't have, especially if you're you're not very, if you're very private about it, you don't understand this is happening within a lot of people, and there are resources that you can learn the tools, and that's what you did. You joined a support group, right?
Yes, Nar-Anon actually turned my life around. I was like many parents who were deep in the throes of their own enabling addiction or just being addicted to fix their daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And the title An Addict Within is just that. There was an addict within the family. Now, it can be a dual addict. One was my daughter, and one was my addiction in trying to fix her at all cost. And there were some things that I did that come out in that book that I'm not proud of, but it's necessary because I was going through my journey also, and I had to learn from the experience. And we keep this so bottled up. I'm always amazed at how many people are in an NAAA meeting, but if you look at the Nar-Anon or Al-Anon groups, how small they are in comparison, because we are so ridden with guilt as parents, brothers, sisters, grandparents, that we are afraid to come out with this. And it's a problem for all of us.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think any parent, we always feel the responsibility of our children's success, but also we really take it personally or feel it's our fault if the children fail, like if they become addicts, and what was our part in that? How did it go wrong? What did I do to create this situation? And really, that's just not the case. I mean, if you can only do so much for your kid, as you found out.
Yes, we all face that moment in time where we have to, and for me it was an interesting moment. I was sitting in an Nar-Anon meeting, and somebody said to me, Mark, sit down and make a list of all the things that you did for your child to stop her from using drugs. And we all can make that list, and we can fill up page after page. Took away their Xbox, took away their car, limited their friends, limited where they went. I, in fact, put a GPS in my daughter's car so she could go back and forth to school, and I could literally have on my computer in my office where she goes all the time, if she was speeding, if she was not speeding. And I was addicted to the reports coming off this machine. Did it stop her? No, because she could drive to a 7-Eleven, and drug dealers do deliver. And it was just a false sense of security. But I listed all the things that I did to try and stop her. And then he said to me, turn the page over. Write down everything that worked. Not for a day, not for a week, not for a month, but worked stopping her from using drugs. And that page to this day is still blank. Because there's nothing I could do, ultimately, that's going to stop her from doing what she does.
Now, tell us that one example of when you were trying to rescue her, and there was a gun involved.
Well, there was more than one occasion of that, and I'm not proud of it, but it's the things I want to show, the outrageous behavior that we as parents or what we will do for our loved ones. And there was a time when one of her roommates called me and said that she was addicted to back on heroin. And so I went up to her apartment to get her. I was going to take her to detox. And this was not the first, but the second occasion I'd actually loaded 45s and took them with me in case there was a problem. And knowing what I know today, I probably would have used them. Fortunately, in that instance, I didn't. But here's where it becomes even more bizarre. At the time, my 14-year-old son, I told him, go in the garage and get the bullets. I'll get the guns out of the safe. And so we're loading magazines. I'm having my 14-year-old son load magazines for 45s. And he says, Dad, I want to go with you. You know I'm a good shot. And I said, well, I know, but I really think I need to do this alone. And my wife is horrified. But she knew not to say something in that moment. But the next day she said to me, do you realize the lesson that you just taught your 14-year-old son? When there's a problem, you load 45s, you take them out, and you deal with the situation. And I went, oh my God. So when you think you're doing something right for one child, you're actually influencing the other child or other children in your family. So there's always that balancing act. So then, of course, I had to sit down and tell my son, we don't really solve things using 45s. But it was a very valuable lesson in helps of getting me towards my recovery.
Yeah, it really affects it. It's such a family disruption, to say the very least. And your family really went through some trying times as far as breaking it up.
Yes. You know, unfortunately, my brother also is an addict, and I watched for years because he also started at the age of 13 or 14 in his career of drugs, and he ended up on speed and cocaine. And I watched the resentment I had towards my parents for always dealing with him, for constantly running after him, buying him things, trying to buy his way out of his problems. He's depressed, so we'll buy him a car. He's this, we'll do this. The resentment I had was unbelievable. Yet I didn't see that I was doing with my daughter the exact same thing my parents were doing with my brother, because it was different. It was my daughter, not my brother. So it was kind of a unique, when I realized this happened. It did. This was, although I don't think any divorce is caused by children, but the problems that I faced in my family were ones that ultimately, and it was not the only cause of my divorce at the time, but it did not help the situation much at all because we were just on different pages. And many families that I deal with today who call me for advice and for help, I notice that the mothers and fathers are not on the same page. In order to battle this correctly, everybody's got to have a group effort.
And I think it's because you feel so powerless with because you don't know what your child's thinking or doing or where they're at, or should you do tough love again, or should they go to rehab one more time, or should you just let them go to jail? It's like, should you bail them out? I mean, these are the questions that are really exhausting, and it's around the clock. I mean, I don't think there's a parent with a child who's actively in their addiction not concerned about these things all the time, and that puts an enormous amount of stress on the parents and the family and the other siblings because, like you said, all of the attention, because it feels so immediate and it's such a constant state of emergency. You're trying to prevent your child from getting into more trouble or overdosing, and the other children are really left kind of fend for themselves emotionally.
Yes, I talk about this in the book a lot, is that there's times when you have to be a parent with a big P and a friend with a little F. And sometimes you have to be a parent with a little P and a friend with a big F. Once you have a child on the route of addiction, all boundaries, all of what you know goes out the window, and you are working from a fear-based environment. And it's very hard. It's a 24/7 job just to make sure that your kid doesn't end up in jail, the morgue, which is obviously the worst place, or in the hospital. But ultimately, all addicts end up going down a path that leads them there. And you can't stop it. And the book really was written for parents and families to understand my journey. They will resonate with that. They will understand because many parents have gone through the same things. Many parents sleep with a phone 24/7 under their pillow. Many of them had boundaries. They lost their boundaries. They changed their boundaries. They have different boundaries for different kids, anger, resentment towards other children, children to parents, parents to parents. But that story will resonate with everybody. Now, how I got out of it in the book gives you a clear path of how to change your life. But everybody's going to change it slightly differently. No two people are going to walk down that journey the exact same way.
And that's very true. Do you feel any guilt for making choices that really weren't helpful in hindsight?
Yes, we can always be Monday morning quarterbacks, and we can look back and say that we did wrong in our life. I mean, not just with our child, in our personal life, with our wives or girlfriends, with our friends, with business. We can go back and we can mourn all the bad decisions, or we can learn from them and try not to make the same ones again. And that's really what the book is about, because we all going to make, no kid came with a manual attached to them when they were born, or at least if they are, in the case of my children, that manual wasn't there. It was lost somewhere. And so we have to do the best we can do, given what we know and what our life experience is. We can't stop this from happening. We can just help them when they want to get help. So do I feel guilty? Well, it took me 8 months or 9 months to actually release the book because I sat in it thinking, oh, everybody's going to think I'm a bad parent. Everybody's going to see all the mistakes I made. Well, guess what? It's just going to show everybody I'm human too, just like everybody else. And we all make good decisions, and we make some bad decisions. And guess what? We hope we make a little bit more good ones than bad ones in life.
That's so true, and I think it's such an important. It's really important to share your story, and I really commend you for that, because there's so many parents that are just, they're so filled with shame, and there's a way you word that in your book. It's like going from shame to sane. So explain that, because that sounds like where you're at. You've regained your sanity.
Yes, and the sanity of my family. You know, when we first find out our child is addicted to drugs or using drugs, we feel extremely guilty. We feel the shame. We feel we have done something wrong as parents, grandparents, family members, and the shame takes over our life. And we end up not talking about it, and we bottle it up inside until we explode. And then we go through this process of trying to second guess, well, where did this go wrong? Where did I screw up? Where did my spouse screw up? What happened that caused all this? There must be one single event that changed their life to become an addict. Well, what you figure out after a long period of time, and we all again go through the journey, whether it's 6 months or 10 years, we all figure out that, guess what? We didn't cause it, and we can't change it. It has to run its course, but we have to be there to help them. And once I got it through to myself that there was nothing I did that stopped it or even slowed it down for any more than a day or two, I had to realize that if this wasn't working, that I needed to change how I did things. Because obviously if you do the same thing the same way, guess what you have? Insanity. And I became insane. I became insane in tracking my daughter 24/7, bank accounts, where she was, what she was doing. I could have gotten a degree in being a detective at that point in time, but it didn't stop anything. Nothing was working. So I ended up having to change my life because the rest of my family had fallen apart. I now had my son who was living with me. I was on my own. Fortunately, I'm an entrepreneur at a successful company, and I was able to take the time off to do all those things. But it wasn't helping my business life. It wasn't helping my personal life. It wasn't helping my family life. Everything had fallen apart. Guess what? I had to find a new way to do things to work. And the book goes through that. It's how I got from crazy insane and shame to sane, understanding that that's what it was going to take for the rest of my family to survive, me and my son. And then later on, of course, I got remarried, and that would have really caused more problems if I was still on the offensive of dealing with my daughter in a way that was just chasing her. In fact, I could make the case that if I wasn't stopping her from doing drugs by all my actions, then maybe I was forcing her to do more drugs, because my chasing her, my cajoling her, my forcing her to go to detox, my forcing her to go to rehab, put pressure on her. And that pressure probably caused her to do even more drugs. So if it wasn't working the way I was doing it, then I needed to change for myself and for her. So that's how I got on my path of fixing my problems.
How has this affected your new family? I mean, how is your wife, as far as feeling the pressures of dealing with your daughter? Because I mean, even though your wife may love her, she's kind of jumping into a situation where most people wouldn't even consider.
If the tables were reversed, I don't know that I would have married my wife if she had the problem of an addicted child, knowing what I know today. Mm-hmm. My wife is the one who got me on the path. My wife is I'm 6'4". My wife is barely 5 foot. She was the one who forced me to go to Al-Anon. I didn't want to go. I just wanted to spend more time trying to solve the problem of fixing my daughter and fixing this family problem. So she has been the ultimate support. Your spouse can be your ultimate support, not your enemy. If you guys get together and figure out a plan that works for both of you, dealing with a life coach or somebody you trust, you will find that your wife or husband is your best support network, your best friend, and can help you and your family become sane. My wife, who is obviously my daughter's stepmother, is the one who started me on the journey of fixing myself and my family. And I credit her in the book for her support, her wisdom, and her guidance.
I think she must be an incredible and amazing woman to undertake such an enormous obstacle. And your story didn't wrap up nicely with a happy little ending. So you're still going through this.
Yes, we're still going through this. Unfortunately or fortunately, my daughter did go to jail again, and she spent approximately 6 months there. And then she went to a state-ordered rehab. It was her 11th or 12th rehab, and finished that, which was an accomplishment in and into itself because she had run out of the last 4. And now she's on a drug court program in the state of California, and she's in sober living. I think she's approaching about 11 months now of sobriety. And we hope that she does well. Of course, we're going to be disappointed if she relapses, but my life is not over. You know, she can break my heart, but she can't break my life because I just can't allow that, because I have to have a life too, and I have other children and other family members that I need to help support to get through life also. And my wife and I just had a baby 2 years ago, so now we have a new addition to the family, so I have to help her get through too. So I have to balance on all 5 kids, 3 biological and 2 step.
I'm really glad you pointed that out, how you as a person, not just a parent with a daughter suffering from drug addiction that's destroying the whole family dynamic and trying to build that back up, but you as just a human being deserve happiness. And I think there's so much guilt surrounding your child's addiction. You just feel like if you're not completely miserable, and this is just it seems like it's what happens. I've talked to so many parents, and if they're not completely miserable or fighting for their child in some super heroic capacity, they feel guilty over that, and then they feel guilty that whatever they're trying to do is not working or not helping, or things are just getting worse. It just seems like it really overshadows every aspect of your health and happiness.
You know, it's a good point. One of the things that I've always tried to do is I do not want to deny my children the dignity of becoming adults. And it's important, as we as parents, we're not raising children, we're raising adults. That's what we want to be. So what happens is my son is in college. Can I go up there and do his college work for him? No. If in fact he fails a test and he tells me about it, I feel like maybe I should go up there, but I don't. Can I help him in his job once he gets a job? Probably not, because he's going to be an engineer, hopefully, in another year. No, I can't help him. I wanted to raise him so he could learn to do the decision-making and work properly in his life, and so he can have a good, functional, productive life. Well, I can't do that for my daughter either. I can't say, gee, let me stop you from doing drugs, let me stop you from this bad path, any more than I can stop my son from doing dumb things in college. And as we all know, we all did a few dumb things in college, all of us.
Right.
Things that we laugh about today or regret today. We weren't always perfect either. Neither will be our kids. So we have to learn to balance that with our own happiness also. We can't always live vicariously through our children. I think why I put out the book was because when I look at families, and I deal with a lot of them, as do you, with addiction, I notice one thing. The word addict is a dirty, dirty word. And I know this has been discussed on some of your previous shows.
Mm-hmm.
HIV in the 80s was a dirty, dirty word. But because we all came out, we made it a clean word. We made it a real disease with no stigma attached, that it could be treated. Addiction, on the other hand, has been around a lot longer than HIV or cancer. And cancer is another one. In my mother's generation, they used to whisper the word.
Mm-hmm.
Cancer, I got cancer. Don't tell anyone. Well, it's the same thing with addiction today. And addiction's been around longer than cancer and HIV, yet we still whisper it. And until we make this a mainstream word and people get the word out there, it's not dirty, it's not something to be secretive, it's not something to be ashamed of, we're never going to get it treated the way it needs to be treated as a disease in today's society or in the future. So it's up to us as family members of addicts to stand up and say, I'm not guilty and I'm not shameful, and this needs to be dealt with. Not with jails, not with punishment, but with good help for these people.
Well, I think as parents, you really associate yourself with your child's accomplishments, and a lot of parents feel that way. How their children turn out is a reflection of their parenting or their love or their. You provided a very affluent, prestigious life for your children, so you know, and you have one that's about to be an engineer, and you have one that's suffering from addiction. So how do you relate to parents who come in, because this is a very common reoccurring theme I see regarding parents, and the enormous amount of shame. It weighs very heavily on them.
Yes, the biggest thing I see is the shame of the parents, whether they walk into Naranan or they call me, is the shame and the feelings of guilt and anger and resentment for other family members. And it's the hardest thing to break down, because we as parents, when you're giving this little baby at the hospital, and whatever your religious belief is, you're giving it to protect, to love, to nurture, to grow into the best they can be. And all of a sudden, this one grows up to be an addict, and you're like, where did I go wrong? Mm-hmm. And it's very difficult, and it's probably the largest single thing I have to work with families on, is to deal with that shame and guilt. And how you deal with that is different for every family. There's no two right or wrong ways. In my case, it was simply making a list of all the things I did, and then finding out it didn't work. And, a lot of kids come from families. I mean, let's look at our president today. He didn't come from the best well-to-do family, and yet he's the president of the United States. Every child deals with life differently. Every parent deals with that life differently. And learning how to deal with this in your life is probably the single most important as a parent you can do for your addict and for yourself.
Now, you're a life coach, which I think is awesome. How do you work with families that are suffering from, or they're in the throes of it as we speak, and they come to you frantic and panic-stricken?
Well, the first thing I do is I let them read the book, and then we talk about the journey they're going on, mm-hmm. and I let them get everything out about where they think it went wrong, because the first thing they want to tell me is where it went wrong and what's wrong with my child. And I kind of say, what's wrong with your child is that she or he is now an addict, and the beast has got them, and it's time to learn how to work with the beast. What happened in the past has no bearing on what you have to deal with now. It's time to look at what's going on now, not what happened. You can't fix what happened. You can only fix today and the future. So we try to focus on what they can do today to fix their life and help their addict.
And I think in that process, that's where the healing begins for the moms and dads out there that just are really struggling with this for years, like you have, and so many others. I think it's really such an amazingly important book, because your purpose is not to tell people this is a book of how to feel better, or how to not raise an addict, or how to deal with one once you've got one. This is your story about how it's affected you personally, and all of the good things you've done and the not so good things, but you are really working with exactly what everyone else is, working with the limited information or resources that you had at the time. And I think it's really important for people to know that once you know better, you do better. But ultimately, it's the person with the addiction that really has to pick themselves up. I mean, you can't live their life.
Exactly correct. No one, Shira, can change their life except yourself. Mm-hmm. And once you start with that basic premise, and you let go of the past, and you live in the present and the future, and you make it better for yourself by setting goals, objectives, all the things you would do for your life, then you start the healing process. By sitting there and trying to figure out where it went wrong, it's just not going to work. It's too late for that. Wherever it went wrong, it did go wrong. It's now time to start fixing your life and trying to help your addict get into recovery.
Absolutely. Now, you are in Southern California, and you are working with families, and you're doing speaking engagements regarding these topics. So if anyone's interested in working with you or inviting you to some place to speak and to help motivate, where can they reach you?
They can reach me through my website at www.anaddictwithin.com, or they can go to marklipp.com, MARKLIPP, just my name, and you can contact me through there. I'm available. I do live in Southern California, in wonderful Huntington Beach area, and I look forward to talking to anyone who needs help. It's kind of, for me, a mission to help those families who are in need of help.
Mark Lipp, I loved your interview. The book is An Addict Within. It's a true story, and it's happening to millions of people. One of the statistics to really kind of keep it in perspective I read on your website is if it's true, which it is, 23.5 million addicts in the United States, and that's affecting at least 70 million additional family members. So that's really an enormous problem that so many other people are facing. So if you feel alone, there's absolutely no reason. There's resources, there's coaches, there's a lot of support available, and you just do what you can and be good to yourself.
Absolutely. And like you said, Shira, there is 23.5 million addicts in the United States. If the average family is 4, that's almost 100 million people being affected by the disease of addiction. Not just the addict, the whole family is involved. And that's an awful lot, about a third of the country. Mm-hmm. And it's a disease that needs to be addressed.
Well, Mark Lipp, thank you for your courage and your passion and your compassion, because there are so many families affected, and until we can really connect and find the support, there's just no need to struggle on your own and blame yourself. So thank you, Mark. It was a great pleasure. And again, it's An Addict Within is the website. Check it out, and marklipp.com. You can find all of his information and check him out, and absolutely get the book. It's really a cathartic experience to just know you're not alone. Thank you.